everyone, and welcome to episode 1 of the Duel podcast, working title, your source for the biggest in Tycoon, and I'm hoping this idea gets off the ground, so I thank everybody for listening. I'm really excited to get to it. Today's episode is just going to be a episode more about my past, my present, and then I'm very, very lucky to be starting at the top as far as event previews are concerned. Maddie has discussed with me doing a full event preview of Sin 618, which could go down as one of the cards of the year. Slice versus Correa. 3 title fights. 3 title fight card is exciting for any org, but it's super exciting when it's Synchronicity. So that'll be a fun one for me. It'll be really exciting because first episode starting at the top with the number 1 org at time of this recording. And you guys will get to know my Tycoon background a little bit. And I realize for the people who started in the last couple years, it might be back in my day. Sit under the old oak tree and I'll tell you a story about how Grandpa used to play Tycoon. But I think it'll be interesting. It'll be exciting. I'm hoping to use this as an outlet. I wanted to be a writer, but at the same time not, because writing's not my forte, spelling, grammar, not my forte. I like to talk. I'm by no means an expert. I'm by no means an audio recording expert. I just have some software. And for those who do not know me, I have a physical disability. So talking for me is easier than writing or using a keyboard. So I thought it would be something a little bit different for the community, and I wanted to get involved in the community again as I had been in the past. And this podcast isn't something that I look at and go, oh, well, I have to eulogize the game, so to speak. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about my background and the way I find that things worked then and worked now, and we'll get into it. So, segment number 1 of the show, I'm going to go over a little bit of my past. So, shout out to anybody who remembers anything I'm referencing. I know I've seen a few of you, Louis De Palma, Lance Templeton, guys that I remember from Chris Carter, guys that I remember from back in the day, the OG crew. I was not one of the original, pioneer waves of the game, but I came in, it would have to be probably 2010, early 2010. I would say spring 2010, and I played right through till probably early 2013, until real life got in the way. I went to college, I got a full-time job, stuff like that happens. And I kind of forgot, basically didn't get bored with the game, just kind of forgot the game existed for a while. Took a hiatus from the game, but back when I was originally playing, I was heavily involved in mostly the Montreal High Street. There was a lot of bustling activity in that area. I worked for SFO Montreal. I was a member of the Goodfellas Alliance. Way back when, I had my first fight at, I believe it was Ontario Fight Club 19, considering that's a company that has hundreds of events and is still here, so I'm proud of Justice for that. I had my first fight on OFC 19, which is pretty spectacular now that I look back at it. And there was so much stuff different about the game. People say it hasn't changed and you fall right back into it, but 2010, 2011, I think the big thing that changed, other than the fact that the community is much smaller and seems to have a few prominent voices that drive it a little bit more, is the fact that there was still a sense of exploration and mystery in the game 5 or 6 years ago that I think is missing a little bit now. Just because I look back at the stats from back then, and training was easier to get but harder to master. Elite primaries weren't really a thing because back when I first played, nobody had a fighter long enough to have, a triple elite black belt type of guy. If you had a fighter who was in his 30s, you were one of the original players. Fighters weren't really reaching retirement age yet. I remember, I was mentored by, and he still plays the game casually, but I was originally mentored by Demas or Richard Davenport. At the time, one of the greatest managers in Tycoon, owner of Abayo Bakari and Jeremy Toenail, dominator of Gamma for eons and eons. I'm back from the age of Bubba Kills in the Water and Jacaro Kane and all these guys that were former number one monster types. But I really feel like the game has evolved in the fact that those guys would probably get destroyed now by the best fighters of today. We used to talk about, nobody will ever see a fighter this good again. He's got such an amazing chin, he's got KO power, he's got big heart, etc., etc. And I look at the fighters now, and you look at a guy like Rocket Bob or Kimbo Slice or some of these guys, and they would destroy the early era guys. But I look back at my Tycoon resume from the early years, and as I said, I worked for SFO, I was in the Goodfellas Alliance, then I moved on and worked for a brief time as a matchmaker for Reach Promotions in Hilo. Shout out Reach. And I was part of the Manhattan Project Alliance for quite a while. So if anybody remembers any of those, you can hit me up in the thread below. I'd be interested to see, because one of the things I'd like to do with this podcast and future shows, if this idea really does get off the ground, is just kind of go, okay, does anybody want to ask me questions? Should we do a Q&A? Do managers want to be interviewed? Do you want to talk about strategy? How has training changed in the last 5, 6, 7 years? When I started to leave the game, transitions and escapes were just becoming a thing. Nobody really knew what they were yet. Clinch work wasn't an elite skill most of the time. There was a lot of variety in fighter builds that has now been lost, in a sense that in order to be at the top level of the sport, you have to be elite at just about everything. And that's a reflection of current day MMA or modern MMA based versus MMA of 10, 15 years ago as well. 10, 15 years ago in MMA, you had specialists. And occasionally you still do have a specialist, but they do still have to train in everything. And that's kind of the case here with Tycoon as well. So I think it's just the game moving with the times and aging and people unlocking the secrets, which was expected, but at the same time part of the fun of the original game. I look back at the org stats. As current day, I run an org, Ajax Fight Club in Amsterdam, so any of my Ajax fighters or anybody like that, Ajax fighters, Ajax managers, shout out to you. I'm very much enjoying it. I've been back in the game for approximately 5 months, 6 months. Basically because a friend of mine who had formerly played, who I hadn't met at the time, asked has anybody ever played this game? And I said, oh yeah, I have. I used to be pretty good at it. I would probably suck now. So we'll see how it goes. I'm still training everybody up. I haven't really become a prominent fighter yet, but I was a top 100 manager back in the day, so hopefully I can get back to that threshold, that pedestal. I'm in the 300s now, and I'm not really fighting too much. So we'll see how that goes. But Ajax, I've noticed the change in org in the last 6 or so years. When I started and through my time playing the game, pay-per-views for orgs were never really a thing. The top org in the world, Synchronicity, how much things change, how much they stay the same, was pulling about, I think it was when I started, they had run about 100 events. I think they were about 120 or 130, and now they're at 618, as we're going to preview later in the show. But 120, 130, and they were pulling an event rating around 250, 230, 250, and they were the best org in the world, and they were running 5, 6, 7,000 seat arenas, and those were considered big shows. The pay-per-view money wall had not been broken yet, and I noticed that's the one thing is there's a lot more private training because people can afford it now. There's a lot more money floating around in the game because that pay-per-view threshold has been broken for a few years. And that was never a thing. We spent hours and hours trying to figure out, okay, when is the viable threshold for pay-per-views? When is that going to be a profitable thing? Because at that time, it wasn't. And now, if you pull a 230, 250 back, what Synchronicity pulled in 2010, 2011, you'd be struggling to stay in the top 10, let alone the top org in the world. That's about what Ajax is pulling now. Pulls anywhere from a 220 to a 300 or so. So, and I think our last show we pulled about a 300 on the nose, and we're the number 8 org in the world. So it would have been 50 points better than what Synchronicity was averaging back 6 years ago, and we're 8th. We would have been the best org in the world. So it's just a reflection of what the talent is like and what the game has evolved to in the hype and the popularity and the management of different companies, whether you be in org, nutrition, clothing, gym, etc. And I have been lucky enough to do matchmaking for an org. I've been lucky enough to be a writer for an org. I've been lucky enough to manage a clothing company. I managed Canadian Fighter Clothing back in the day. So I've done a few of those things. Never done nutrition, just because I never had the money for it at the time. Still don't. Maybe this will be a project that helps earn me a few bucks, but we'll see. People like it, people get involved, and I can be involved in the community. It would be nice to see this be a long-term, or long-term whenever I have time, project. So I've done almost everything there is to do. I had never managed an org on my own exclusively, so this is a new fun thing and challenge for me, kind of to keep myself interested in the game, because I realize a lot of the fighters are going to take a long time before they're realistically ready. So while I wasn't fighting, I wanted something else to do. So this is part of that, and the org is part of that. So I'm super excited to bring you episode 1. And as I said, any questions for me, any questions for other managers, any requests that you may have, you can post them below. You can PM me in the game. I'll answer as much as I can. maybe we can do a weekly or bi-weekly segment of these questions and make it a regular part of the show. I'm hoping to have a co-host of some sort at some point, if people are interested, to give my own voice a rest, because recording in long spurts is difficult. But as I said, I'm no audio expert, but we'll see how this goes. Hopefully you guys like it. And right after this short break, we'll get to the full card, full shebang preview of this Saturday's Sin 618, courtesy of Synchronicity and Matt. Promotional consideration paid for by the following: HGH Nutrients. When regular steroids just aren't good enough, visit HGH Nutrients, located on the New York High Street, an official sponsor of Empire 310K. They have 5 Monster 160 supplements for all of your fighting needs. The king of the EQ is ready to serve you at HGH Nutrients in New York. Official Synchronicity preview brought to you by Kombat Klothing, official partner of Synchronicity, now with a new t-shirt design to celebrate their partnership. Now in stock, $50 a piece, so come on over to Tokyo and pick up your merch and other classic designs along the way. Good luck to all our sponsored fighters on both this Synchronicity card and our young superstars in JAG Battle League. Alright, so Sin 618 preview. Super excited to get to this one. Probably one of the biggest cards of the year. Episode 1 of the show. Number 1 org in the world. And they've asked me to go ahead and do a full 10-fight card preview. And all you guys are going to get to hear my thoughts, hear my predictions, laugh at me when they're wrong, all that fun stuff. Go bet against me because I jinx things. That's usually the way it works. All that good stuff. So let's get to it. Sin 618, emanating from Wembley, starts with a 145 bout to open the card between Blair Darrow and Tyrone Smoochie Wallace. I apologize in advance to anybody's manager and any of these fighters. If I mispronounce your name, I'm sorry. I'll try my best. I spent 2 or 3 hours on pre-show notes for these previews and for this show, so I am giving it my best effort, and we'll see. But these are my thoughts on these fights, so let's get to it. As I said, Blair Darrow versus Wallace. Blair Darrow coming in with a 26-1 record and a 4-2 record in Sin. Wallace with a 36-34 record, 10-16 in Sin. So not a 500 fighter in Sin, but a warrior and a long-time vet. His 27th fight in Sin. I believe he is the most experienced Sin fighter on this card. It's really a battle of 2 old lions trying to salvage their careers. 36 versus 40 years old. Wallace is actually on a 2-fight win streak despite the 10-16 Sin record, but it appears kind of fleeting in that way. He could be one step away from retirement at any point. He's just trying to hold on and maybe make a run to middle of the pack, top contender status if he could reel off a few more wins. 26 of the combined 40 losses between these two fighters are by knockout, which I found pretty unusual for a 145-pound fight, to have guys with, not a lot of 145-pound fighters have knockout, stop-cold power. And so I don't know if they face guys that have a lot of power, or if their chins are just that questionable. Darrow appears to have the skill advantage in all areas, judging by primaries and skills and particular fights that have occurred so far. I'd probably my prediction for this fight is Darrow by second round KO. I just don't trust Wallace's chin. He's proven that the chin might be gone, and at 40 years old, and with all the miles that he's taken, this is his 71st fight. I think it might be time to just give up the wars. I think he's had too many. I think second round KO for Darrow, and possibly this is the loss that sends Wallace into retirement, because if he gets finished here, that'll end the win streak, send him to the back of the line again. 71st fight, he'll basically be a 500 fighter. That'll be his 17th loss in Sin. Might be time to take off the gloves and set him down in the middle of the cage and leave on your own graces after that. So, as I said, predicting Darrow with a second round victory there. Next, we have a 145-pound fight between Jimmy Doyle and, here we go, Karuta Astushi. We're going to go with that. Jimmy coming in with a 22-10-1 record, a 1-0 record in Sin versus Atushi, who's 15-10, 2-3 in Sin, his 6th Sin fight. Atushi appears to have the initial ground advantage, but it looks like it's purely a defensive ground advantage because he has a high BJJ skill, but he's never actually scored an offensive submission win. So I think it's purely, transitional, defensive grappling, escapes. So it'll be interesting to see if it can get anything done on the ground. Doyle coming in previously with a win over Blair Darrow, who we previously discussed. His first and only fight in Sin came obviously with a win against Darrow, slightly ahead of him on the card here. And maybe, if Darrow beats Wallace, we might see a rematch again down the line. But we'll have to see. Doyle's previous win coming over Darrow, and he'll look to continue he's on a 4-fight win streak right now. Previously a fighter of Stu Mack. Stu Mack left the game. An imposed hiatus, just waiting for him to be released from his camp, and now he is, and now he's fighting and active again. I think Doyle will probably take this one by decision. That's who I'm taking to improve his record to 23-10-1, and going to 2-0 in Sin. We might have a real contender here. Next, we have a 265 bout between Damian Thorne and Samuel Douglas. These are two fighters that I'm a little more familiar with, and it really shows the quality of the card that two heavyweights of this pedigree, or previous pedigree, are third from the bottom on this show. Damian Thorne coming in with a 24-12 record, 3-3 in Sin, his 7th Sin fight. Samuel Douglas coming in with a 13-6 record, 0-2 in Sin so far, which surprises me because I am very familiar with him on the regional circuit, and I believe he's quite a strong fighter. So even though this is the top league in the world, or top fight league in the world, Douglas is an extremely good fighter, and I thought he would have been at least a middle tier contender at this level, but so far it hasn't worked out for him. Both fighters are coming off KO losses in their last fight. I seem to wonder whether, that'll make the managers more cautious with their sliders. Do they come in more timid? Are they afraid that the chin is going to get cracked? Is that a thought that goes through their head, or do they remain aggressive as they were previously? Douglas is a red belt, primary BJJ, but again, like we talked about with Atushi, it seems purely defensive in that he doesn't really use it to set up submissions. Seems like more of a defensive grappling, more of a transition game, more to keep himself out of danger as opposed to put others in danger. I think heavyweight fights are always the toughest to pick because boom heavyweights can always be a pick 'em. All it takes is one shot. Even with some, guys with good chins, all it takes is one shot to get smashed, and you could be winning, the fight 2-0 and get cracked. So it's really, really hard to pick. Thorne's fun fact about Damian Thorne that I found: his second Sin fight was against Rocket Bob, who of course is one of the best heavyweight, super heavyweight competitors in the world. So I felt like, you come into Sin and your second fight is against a future champion, future legend of the sport. So I kind of felt bad for him. Poor guy to get that tough draw, but he's still sticking around and he's still doing okay. My official prediction for this fight is Damian Thorne by a second round TKO. I hate to pick against my buddy, Mr. 89, but I think Thorne's going to get it done here. I think experience will rule the day, and I have trouble believing that a heavyweight fight of this caliber will go to the judges, so I'm going to go with a second round TKO for Damian Thorne. Next, we have a 145 fight between Brody Kavanaugh and Derek Vineyard. This is the battle of the Archie Griffith casualties. We'll get to him a little bit later. You'll see him in a fight later on this card. But Brody Kavanaugh coming in with a 24-11-2 record, a 6-5-1 record in Sin. Derek Vineyard, a 14-4 record, lost his first fight in Sin. This is fight number 2 for him. This is a fight that I found interesting because the ID difference is fairly large. Kavanaugh's a 277, Vineyard's a 318K, and I wondered, will that difference show on fight night or not? Sin could prove to be a major step up in competition for him. He came into the York 14-3. All behind him, loses his first fight, and now he gets a former champ in fight 2. So it'll be interesting to see if he can make any progress or make any waves in the 145-pound division. Seems to be the type of opponent to... Kavanaugh seems to be the type of opponent to wear his opponent down. 24 of his 35 fights have needed the judges so far. Or 24 of his 37, have needed the judges. So he seems to take people into the deep waters, test them, and I think it would be a tough fight for Vineyard that way, to have to match skill for skill with a guy like that. Kavanaugh, of course, was the defending champ last fight, lost his last fight, and now he's down 7th on the card in a prelim fight that's pretty tough follow-up. I think Vineyard will fight valiantly, but Kavanaugh is going to prove to be too much here and will take a decision victory from Derek. Next on the fight card, we have a 205 bout. Leif Erikson versus Jaquan Robertson. And I'm very intrigued by this bout, just because it's Erikson's promotional debut. He's 17-11-1 versus Jaquan, who's 26-9. His 9th fight in Sin, he's 5-3. And it's a battle of win streaks right now, in that Erikson has 4 in a row, and Robertson has 3 straight. Erikson's promotional debut, as I said, and what a draw. He's got an opponent in Jaquan. Jaquan looks like one of those guys whose record is good as a fighter and then kind of average so far in Sin, but you look at the guys he's lost to, those 3 losses, and he's proven to be kind of a gatekeeper in the best sense of the word at 205. If you beat Jaquan Robertson, you will be a regular contender for titles in Synchronicity. He just can't seem to break through to that upper echelon, but the guys who beat him regularly have. I think Erickson is going to attempt that he proves to belong here because he's got considerable power, he's got really good skill, but will his power be enough to carry him through? My prediction here is he'll ultimately lose a close decision. I think it could even be one of those decisions that might be a split decision or a majority decision. But I've got Robinson winning this fight and extending his win streak to 4 in a row and potentially getting a top contender at 205 in his next fight. Those are the bottom 5 fights on the card. After a short ad break, I'll get to the top 5, including our 3 title fights on this pay-per-view. Hugely excited for this, guys. Promotional consideration paid for by the following. Groove Gear, Tycoon's #1 clothing company and official sponsor of Rise 325K. We provide eco-friendly, fair trade MMA gear and sponsor over 200 fighters to date, always looking to expand our sponsorships. Head to Los Angeles and get your groove on. Only the hottest designs for cold-hearted fighters at Arcticus University London. Arcticus University London is a long-time London staple, stylish by nature and affordable by design. So visit us on the high street and get yours today. And we're back to preview half 2 of this gigantic fight card. And I can't believe what a card this is, guys. I mean, 3 title fights, giant pay-per-view. You expect nothing less from the #1 org in the world, and we come back with a fight at 185 between Lakas Gravas, I hope I'm saying that right, and Anton Obuhov. You guys make this hard for me, but we are going to try. So, these 2 guys, Gravas is 8-3, making his debut in the promotion. Obuhov is 22-16-1, 8-5-1 in Synchronicity, so this will be his 15th Synchronicity fight. Gravas coming off of a loss against Alexis Andreev in Pulse. No shame in that, because Andreev is one of the best fighters in the world, and probably the best, or one of the top 2 in his weight class. Was interesting because looking at that fight and doing the research, he was able to be taken down. There was some struggle on that, but Obuhov has the same manager as Andreev, so the sliders might show a bit of a preview in that other fight. Difference here is Obuhov has a seemingly questionable chin in comparison to Andreev's fights. 10 of 16 of his losses are by KO and TKO, so I wonder if there'd be a little more success using the power, getting to the chin, because Gravas has considerable power. It'll just be hard to connect at this elite level. However, all I think it'll take is one big shot from him. My prediction is Obuhov wins the first 2 rounds, and then Gravas knocks him out in third by connecting with one big shot. I think it'll be a come-from-behind win, but I think the debuting fighter will take it in the 3rd round. Next, we have a 170-pound fight between Street Fighter and Benson White. Street Fighter is 21-6-1, 4-1 in Synchronicity. Benson White is 26-8, 4-2 in Synchronicity. This is a hugely interesting fight because both these guys are ranked in the top 100. You'll see that on the card from pretty much here on out. Benson White looking to start a new win streak. Fighter looking to rebound off his first Sin loss after winning his first 4 fights. He lost to Mensa Sonata. No shame in that at all. But the big, interesting dilemma I have here in this fight is Fighter in that fight against Sonata, he fought 145 for a large portion of his career, and he jumped 2 weight classes to 170 for that fight. And normally he has a very good chin. It got cracked and he got finished. So it'll be interesting to see if that chin holds up going up 25 pounds regularly now. Sonata has huge power, so I'm not sure if that was a fluke KO or if the chin just can't handle higher weight classes as well as it would at 145. It doesn't get any easier because Benson White also has a huge power advantage for a 170. He's an equal footing striker. He's only been to the judges 7 times in 34 fights. So he is a killer be killed type fighter. This is probably the toughest fight for me to pick on this card so far. I think it's going to be a very close fight for most of the fight, but I think Benson White will come through with a late stoppage due to his strikes and his power. Next, we have a 145-pound fight between Archie Griffiths, remember that name from earlier, and Esteban St. Pedro. Griffiths is 26-1, 20 wins, 6 losses, not 26, and 1 draw. 10th fight in Sin, he's 6-3. Esteban St. Pedro coming into Sin for his debut with a title shot, 145-pound title, 16-3-1. 4 straight wins for Griffiths. This is his first title defense as the new champ. St. Pedro coming through with 10 wins in a row and looking to make a spectacular debut on the world stage. I think the most impressive streak of this fight is the fact that Griffiths' last 24 fights in a row has needed judges. Where's my prop bet that this goes all 5 rounds? Pedro entering his fighting prime at 28, but question is he ready to jump in at the deep end right now? It's the Sharks with a Sin title shot in his debut fight. Polar opposite fighter to Griffiths because 12 of his 16 wins have been finishes, but he's shown the ability to go 5 rounds when he's needed to. I think he will need to here just because of the way that Griffiths tends to grind out decisions, but I think I'm going with St. Pedro. I'm going with the debuting fighter. I'm picking and new champ, St. Pedro. And I truly feel that if he's trained right, if he's slidered right, he could go down as an all-time great if he keeps on this path to be 28 and be the new champ in the biggest org in the world. There's nowhere to go. He could just defend that title for a long, long time. Next, we have your co-main event. 205-pound title between Evil Nixon and Joey Couture. I hope I'm getting that last name right as well. 2 great fighters, 2 great managers here. Nixon is 37-8-2. He's 19-5-1 in Sin, looking for his 20th Synchronicity win. Joey is 38-18-1, 9-8 in Sin. So looking not to fall to 500 in Sin. As I said, 2 great fighters, 2 great managers. Both fighters are former top 10 in the world. Both managers are former number 1 managers in the world. Both have seen and fought a lot of wars, and this will be their 3rd fight against each other. And there's 104 fights between the 2 of them. Now, my one big concern with Joey is he's 40 years old. Is this his last chance? If he loses today, is this his last shot? He was once released from Sin, going on a 3 or 4 fight losing streak earlier in his career, and had to fight his way back to this spot and has done so. Both these guys have shown that they're not afraid. They're two huge power fighters, and you could say the same for Nixon. I mean, 40 years old, is this Joey's last chance? Nixon, he had 3 against Tyrone Jones, and now he's fighting 3 in a row against Joey. How much does he have left in the tank? All these guys are killers, but if you're just swapping blood with them, how much does that take out of you? I'm going to go with an official prediction of Evil Nixon by unanimous decision, retaining his title, and I think this will be the fight of the night for this card. Should be really interesting to watch in full. And I'm really interested to see how the prediction record for me turns out, whether I go 9-1 or 2-8, or could be all over the place. Finally, we have our main event, the title of the show, the guys on the poster. 265 title fight, Kimbo Slice versus Wesley Correa, Mr. Cabbage himself. Kimbo is 36-1, 16-3-1 in Synchronicity. Wesley Correa making his debut in Synchronicity in the main event. How will that play on his nerves? And will he be focused to take this title away? I find it interesting that we've got 3 title fights on this card, as I've said many times before, but 2 of the challengers are debuting fighters new to the organization, so it'll be interesting. Correa is 21-3-1, making his debut. 2 guys who have huge chins and even bigger power, so this will be a fun one. They could just stand in the middle, bite down on the mouthpiece, and swing. Huge test for Correa, but he's got the power to potentially pass the test. The question for me is, does he have the formula that Rocket Bob seems to have? Kimbo is 16-2-1 in his last 19 fights, but both losses and the draw have come to the same guy, Rocket Bob Frankels. So maybe he just hates big guys who are bald. So this Wesley could have that advantage. He's a big, bald guy with power. Maybe that's the formula. I don't know. Correa's on a 4-fight win streak. He was the last on-record heavyweight champ of Synchronicity Europe. Can't deny that he is a fantastic fighter, but he also faces the daunting task of facing the number 1 ranked heavyweight in the world in his debut fight for the number 1 org in the world. Can't see this lasting very long. It'll truly be a test of any chin can be cracked, because I believe that statement to be true, that these 2 guys have huge power and huge chins. Correa fights valiantly, but ultimately my prediction is Slice retains by a KO in the 3rd round. So I'd like to, before I go, I'd like to get some housekeeping out of the way. First, we'll review all of my picks for those that missed them. So I have Darrow over Wallace, Doyle over Atucci, Thorne over Douglas, Kavanaugh over Vineyard, Grabus over Abuhoff, White over Fighter, St. Pedro over Griffiths, Nixon over Joey, and Kimbo over Correa. So, I'd like to thank Matt for being so gracious in sponsoring this episode, allowing me to put a bigger focus and draw more attention to what I think is a fantastic card. And thank you to all the sponsors who were nice enough to sponsor a promo in this episode, sponsor an ad in this episode, shout outs, everything amazing. It really makes it worth my while to have people listen and to have put the time in. As I said, I spent 3 hours on show notes for the show yesterday, and now I'm recording it. It's probably taken about 2 or 3 hours today, so it takes a considerable amount of time, and I still have to edit it this week and post it and do all that stuff. So thank you so much for everybody for the outpouring of support. It's been quite unexpected and humbling. I just, I thought this was a silly idea that I'd throw out in the community for me to have something to do, and the amount of people that have come to me and said, hey, you've got a great idea and I want to be involved and it's something different and we need different, is really fun. So thank you guys. Thank you, Matt. Thank you to everybody who sponsored. And I'm going to be recording episode 2 next week. It's going to feature some other fights and some other segments. If you have a question, if you want to do a Q&A with me, have me answer some questions, I am open to doing that. I am accepting org, fight card previews or fight previews. I'm accepting promos and sponsors for next week's show through next weekend. If you are interested in that at all, or know anybody that would be interested in getting involved in a project like this, please reach out. Please PM me in the game. Please post in a thread. Please do any of that, and I'll get you, rates and price lists, and we can discuss on all of that sort of thing. See if that's something that fits your time and your schedule. As I said, I really hope to make this a long-running project when I have time. Right now, it's largely fairly casual. I'm not an expert. I'm not an audio expert, as I've said before, so I hope you guys like it. I hope I didn't put you to sleep. Thanks so much for listening, and please, please, please continue to get involved. PM me with any ideas, questions, and stuff you just want me to answer, or you want me to ask to other managers for them to answer. So thanks so much for listening. I'll see you next week, and that's it for episode 1 of The Duel. Thanks again, guys.